So looking at the time, I'll try to shorten my sermon a little and see if we can still get out of here by noon. But if we don't beat the people to the white meat chicken, I hope you can understand. My sermon scripture this morning comes from the book of Psalms. It's all of Psalm 19. Now, when I say all of Psalm 19 only has 14 verses. So we're not looking at one of the longer ones, but it's Psalm 19. It reads this way: "The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, their voice is not heard. Yet their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In heavens he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom from his wedding canopy, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and nothing is hid from its heat. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. But who can detect their errors? Clear me from hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from the insolent. Do not let them have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer." This is the word of God for the people of God. So if you went outside on the date of August 21st, 2017 at around 2 p.m., you probably would have noticed something spectacular. Elise and I were sitting inside at that time, but we noticed that all of a sudden the outside went from this beautiful blue sunlit sky to a dim, kind of dusk-like feeling. If you remember that date, you probably remember that during that time at about 2 p.m. there was a total solar eclipse that happened at that time. We were not in the total part. I think we had about 95% coverage or something, but my friend in South Carolina was telling me that he was in the path of total 100% coverage, and he was telling me that it just went from day to night, just like that. And then a few seconds later, it went from night back to day. And that was only for a few seconds, up to a couple minutes. But think about what happened in Beijing in 2014. The thick smog got so bad that they could not see the sun anymore. I saw a picture of them walking around with masks on their face. That's how deadly the smog was. That's how thick the smog was. They were walking around. They could not see the sun. In fact, the news station in Beijing, all the news stations in Beijing broadcast video footage of the sun so that they could put it on the TV so that the people would not be sun deprived for days on end. It's funny how those things work, but typically when we look up to the sky, we can see the sun and the blue and the clouds, right? But then there are those instances like the smog in Beijing, like the eclipse, that we cannot see the sun. And it's because sometimes we bring it on ourselves. Think about this. God didn't bring the smog to Beijing, but he allowed for the smog to exist. Okay? Does that make sense? We're going to unpack that a little. Creation, think of Adam and Eve. Creation, what did God say at the end of each day? He created the heavens and the earth. and it was day, and it was night, and it was good, right? Each day in creation was good. Each thing that he created was good. And at the end of those 6 days, he had what he thought was a good, perfect garden that he was going to put the first humans in, right? He thought it was good and perfect, and it was because he created it. But what happened the second he put those humans down? He gave them a command, right? You can eat of anything in this garden. You can eat of anything you want. You can touch anything you want. You can go wherever you want. But you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? That fruit that tree bears. I can imagine that this was like a case when a parent tells their child that, okay, I'm leaving for work or I'm leaving to run my errands. You can do anything you want, just don't do this. And what does the child do the second their parent leaves? Don't touch that hot stove. Oh, I'm going to touch that hot stove, and I'm going to realize that it's hot, but I'm going to keep doing it because you told me not to, right? The second that God said, I'm giving you dominion over everything here. I'm giving you leadership over everything here. Just don't eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does Eve do? Well, we have to blame the serpent, right? The serpent tells her that it's okay to eat of the fruit. He just doesn't want you to have the same knowledge that he has, right? So she eats the fruit, and then she hands it to Adam to eat. Now, I wish. I always tell Elise that I blame all of the original sin on Eve because she's the original one that ate the apple. But she handed it to Adam at that point, right? And Adam could have said, "No, God, I need a new model. I need a not defective model, right? Here's another rib. Make another one for me, right?" Adam could have done that, but he didn't. He took original sin on himself as well and ate of the apple. At that moment, I believe the first weeds came in the first perfect, good garden. You see, we bring weeds into our gardens, right? But God allows that. God allows free choice. God allows free will. He says, here are your two choices. You can follow after me and be good and blameless and righteous, or you can follow after the world and bring weeds into your perfect, already laid out garden. He wants us to follow him. He creates expecting us to follow him. And yet there are times that we bring so much devastation to this world that we can't even see the sun for several days. Now, I took an astronomy class in college. Worst decision of my life. But I took an astronomy class in college. I had to have a science credit with a lab, and I've always been fascinated by planets. So, this was just going to be a study of the planets, right? Wrong. So one time in class, the only thing that I really stuck with me was the way in which Neptune and Pluto interact with each other. And by that, I mean there's one time every year, and I'm not talking about an Earth year, I'm talking about a Pluto and Neptune year. There's one time in every orbit where when Neptune is orbiting, Pluto actually comes and its orbit is in front, closer to the sun than Neptune. And that's partially why Pluto's not a planet anymore. I'm not going to get into that right now, but if you take Pluto out of it, you should also take Neptune out of it. But anyway, Pluto comes in front of Neptune. I've always been told as growing up that the 9 planets of our solar system, Pluto was always the last one, right? But every year, Pluto becomes our 8th one, and Neptune becomes our last one. Now, we could look at that and say that was a flaw, that the system is imperfect, right? Thank you for saying that. Because God created it that way for a reason, right? God created the heavens and the earth. He created their orbits to be perfectly imperfect. He created it so that Pluto could have its spot in the sun, if you will, for just a little bit. Now, that being said, we can't blame all of the bad things we do on God. If we bring these weeds to our garden, we can't say God did it. Now, I read a letter last year. I follow when we visit Elisa's grandparents in Florida, we typically go to the same church if we're there on a Sunday morning. And I follow that church on Facebook. And the pastor there wrote a letter last year in wake of Hurricane Irma. They had to cancel their services because it was just going to be too destructive. And he wrote a letter saying basically that he heard some parishioners say that hurricanes are God's way of punishing us for something, right? Thank you. Because if we look at it that way, then we're saying that God brings destruction, that God brings these terrible things to us, when in reality, hurricanes are just a natural process by which hot air and cold air, enough of it gets together and it creates a cyclone enough to build over the ocean and dump a bunch of water and wind on us and a bunch of other stuff that we don't even want to start discussing. But it's part of the perfect process that God has established for us. You know, I've said that before, and then people have said, why on earth would God create such a system that would cause that? And I said, well, you like the high pressure system. You like when the sun is out, the blue skies are out there. There's maybe a couple wispy clouds, and it's so beautiful. But then there's always a call for rain after all of those high pressure days, right? There's always that, my crops are not growing as much as they should. And we ask for the rain. Think about farmers. When they plant the crops, they want a lot of sun, but they also need a lot of rain, right? In order for those crops to completely come up. And if you have that system of sun and rain, eventually they're going to get together in a way that's not a good way for us. You see, God doesn't bring destruction. He allows us to create our own destruction, if that makes sense. When God told Adam and Eve not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he was expecting them to follow his way. But he created this garden. Picture the Garden of Eden, the most perfect garden you've ever seen. Trees everywhere, vines on the trees. It was probably the most beautiful sight that anybody could ever see. 30 seconds later, it turned into a garden riddled with weeds because Adam and Eve disobeyed God. But still, after he kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, he still gave them dominion over his creation, right? He still said, be fruitful and multiply. You are the dominion over his creation. But sometimes when we have this dominion, it goes to our heads, right? We have the power, we have the leadership, we have dominion over everything, and it goes to our heads and we exploit it for our purpose. You know, over the years, the word exploit has become some sort of a negative connotation, but really it just means to produce something for someone or something's own good. We can have exploitation and it be good. We can have exploitation to point everything to God. We create God's kingdom, God's creation, God's beautiful, wonderful garden into something that it's not. I love the image of the sun in this passage from Psalm. It said that it starts rising from the ends of the heavens and it goes down on the other side. That's powerful. That's beautiful, isn't it? It's showing that God has dominion over the sun and gives us the gift of a new day. We try to blame the weeds or the things that cause us not to see the sun on other people. don't we? We try to say, if Missy didn't do X, Y, and Z, I would not be in the place that I am today. When in reality, you should probably be yelling at the mirror and not at Missy. You should probably be saying, if I had not chosen to follow this person, I could still see the beauty of the sun. When you look up into the sky, what do you see? Do you see a beautiful landscape? Do you see just a beautiful blue skies and beautiful sun, beautiful clouds? Or do you see a complex, beautiful, perfect system of creation? Do you see it as something to give thanks for? Do you see it as something that you have dominion over as long as you are seeking after God's own heart? The sky, when impeded, is a direct sign of God's goodness and perfectness of creation. Think about what, after Noah's Ark, what did God put in the sky? A perfect rainbow, right? A rainbow that says, I will not flood the whole earth again. But there's a caveat to that, right? I won't flood the whole earth again, but I expect you to live a perfect and blameless life so that I'm not tempted to do that again. We must try to live into that beautifully, wonderfully made creation by following God's will. But a lot of times, we're looking out for number one, right? And that number one is us. We're looking out for what's best for us. I love that Michael Jackson song. I'm looking at the man in the mirror, and I'm starting there. We can't choose to try to create or try to correct somebody else if we're not willing to correct ourselves first. We can't bring somebody to heaven, to the cross, to kneel down and say, I am a sinner, forgive me, until we ourselves look at the log in our own eye. God gives us this beautiful, beautiful creation, and yet we are the ones who create the weeds. We are the ones that create the dust. We are the ones that create everything that won't allow us to see the sun. One thing that I love about not being in a big city is picture the sky in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles at night. You're not going to see the stars. You're not going to see other planets. You're going to see the top of the antennas that are signaling so the planes don't run into the building, right? Here, when you go out your back or front door and you look up into the sky, what do you see? You see the stars. Each one of those stars was put there by our Creator. He put them there in that specific place for a reason, for us to enjoy, for us to look at and give thanks to God for everything that He has created for us. Those stars are a sign of God's dominion over us and as a sign of our dominion over the earth. However, if we're not following after God's dominion, we have no business having dominion over this earth. We fall short. We bring the weeds into His perfect creation. What do we have to offer to a perfect, wholesome creation that would not cause weeds, but rather cause a perfect Christian love to be exhibited? And that's the catalyst, right? If we love ourselves, if we love each other, if we love creation, we are following after God's own heart. God's creation is perfect, and He gives us the choice to make it even better or to make it not so good. As my middle school principal would always say on the announcements, make it a great day or not, the choice is yours. Are we paying attention to the weeds that we are causing in God's beautiful, wonderful, perfect garden? Or are we trying to blame those weeds on God or somebody else? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.